So I currently have a glasses lens that fell out of its case, and contacts that I cannot find and that might not still exist in this household. So that's fun. So I have nothing to do but talk about Animal Farm because I read it a couple days ago, and I'm glad. Part of me is glad this happened, so I could have a time when I had nothing else to do but get this done, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. Okay, Animal Farm is really, really amazingly written, and it's a great political satire. It's not necessarily the best story. Hold on. Yes? Yes, I did just try to call you, Mom. I would like you to know that you are cutting it. Like, not that don't continue because this is funny as hell, but you're cutting into my book vlog on Animal Farm. I swear this is unplanned, guys. I was just going to tell you that I think my glasses frame is, I think it's far gone enough that I probably will need to come with you and pick out a new frame for the lenses. Okay, a couple hours. Like, be more concrete. Can you give me like a clock time? It's 2:23. Okay. Okay, love you. Bye. Okay. Sorry about that. That was my mom about the glasses situation. Okay, so Animal Farm. And I'm just going to carry on because it would be uploaded. I'm just going to carry on. Animal Farm is not necessarily the best story. It's a so-so. Okay, the problem is Orwell set out to create a satire of the Russian Revolution, which ended badly. So his story has to have an unhappy ending. The problem is that it's really hard to make an unambiguously unhappy bad guy wins ending satisfying. In 1984, he was able to do this. I think probably the biggest difference is simply that he had 200 pages, including the last 70, to very slowly unhappify the ending. Because that's what he does. In 1984, Orwell, again, over the last like 80 or so pages, 70 plus a couple pages, basically the entire third part of it, not the entire third chapter, because it's divided into part 1, part 2, part 3. All of part 3, and the very last bit of part 2 kind of also, is him gradually taking hope away from you. This Animal Farm doesn't have the chance to do that because it's so short. Not that I'm unhappy that it's short, because I wanted a short book after Game of Thrones, but it was short enough that it didn't have the time to make the ending really satisfying, I feel like. A happy ending would have been satisfying to that story, an unhappy ending wasn't. And I get that a happy ending would have been counterproductive to what he was doing, but at the same time, that's just kind of a flaw in what he set out to do. It's not the fact that your story has an inherent problem to it that no amount of writing skill can get away just from the concept of what you've set out to do. That's not my problem as a reader. Nonetheless, Animal Farm is still good. It's still exceptionally well written. It's at its height earlier on, I feel like, when it's still a relatively light-hearted book. Basically, when Snowball is around. And let me talk about Snowball. Snowball, for those of you who have read 1984 and not read Animal Farm, Snowball is Emmanuel Goldstein, but we see him at the beginning. And both him and Emmanuel Goldstein represents a figure from actual Soviet Russia whose name I don't know. And I don't know who. I know that there's a guy because Orwell talks about him. I don't know who he is or anything about him. Is that the Trotsky guy I've heard of? Possibly. But I don't know. Anyways, I will always think of him as Emmanuel Goldstein. But Snowball... Okay, for those of you who don't know, the plot of Animal Farm is basically animals revolt against humans. And in particular, the animals in the Manor Farm revolt against the humans in the Manor Farm. And they use, it's clearly, the animals are communists. That's the, it's abundantly clear. And keep in mind, this is coming from Orwell, a British socialist writing, I think, before the Cold War was really going. So this isn't a communism bad. Well, communism is bad, but like in the book, communism ends up being bad. But this isn't like a propaganda thing. It's not the right time to be one. But okay, so basically things are going great for a while, and then the pigs in the farm kind of start to take over. And I think if you look at it fundamentally, what happened, I think what Orwell is saying, at first when I was reading the book, okay, finish plot summary first. Pigs start to take over, they take over more, they do some bad things, and then basically at the end, I won't spoil it, but at the end, it basically, the pigs become everything that the humans were, at least in respect to the animals. You know, symbolic of how Joseph Stalin and the communist leadership became as bad or worse than the bourgeoisie that had been ruling Russia before then. So what Snowball is Snowball is a figure who's there, he's present early in the revolution. He's basically the public speaker. He is the one who does the most stuff. And he fights bravely in the battle, which what makes the early part of the book so enjoyable is how lighthearted it is in tone. Because the book is really, really lighthearted. Almost no one dies. And it's kind of ridiculous to see these animals, you know, push out the humans, like literally push them out of the farm and lock the gate behind them, as opposed to kill them, which the animals don't do. Though the humans do kill one of the animals. And that basically snowballs around for that early lighthearted section. And the only thing of the incoming corruption that happens while he's around is when the pigs at one point essentially claim that they need a larger portion, they need to have more food than everyone else is allowed to have, because they like they're the leaders and they need to be well fed and well thinking and such, and so they need the apples and the milk in particular. And you know, that 1984 has a similar sense, because these are two. Animal Farm is essentially a briefer version of 1984 with pigs, little piggies. who are actually evil. Except Snow. I've heard it speculated. This is what I was building up to. A friend of mine, while I was talking about this book, speculated that the reason that Snowball was later basically betrayed by Napoleon and Squealer, the other two main pigs, was because even though he in public defended the apples and milk thing, that in private he may well have been against it. And so the idea is that behind closed doors where we weren't seeing, Snowball, who was basically the sincere communist, unlike Napoleon and Squealer, who are just out for power, Snowball was like, hey, we shouldn't, do this. We shouldn't be bad. And Napoleon was like, and okay, so that lighthearted tone, a couple other things I liked about the book. That lighthearted tone I mentioned kept going for it until about halfway through it. Because throughout, it's an allegory for the Russian Revolution where no one dies throughout the entire revolution. The revolution section, no one dies. And then, let's see. Okay. Until, no one dies until there's this event about halfway through the book or so, seemingly maybe 10 pages after Snowball's evicted, during which Napoleon suddenly slaughters a load of animals, and it's awesome. That moment is awesome because it's like we've only seen one animal die up till that point, and it was someone we'd never heard of. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm doing badly today, I guess. I think it's because I waited too long to vlog about this book. So I'm trying to think of other things to talk about it. I mean, it is really good. Despite what I said that its narrative was unsatisfactory, and I'll stand by that criticism of it because it's just so sad to see what all the pigs do, and it's not sad in like a good positive tearjerker way. It's sad. I have in mind. Oh, how do I? What's a code for this? I'm just going to mention Horse Slaughterer. Those of you who've read it will know what I'm talking about. That moment in particular was really sad in a non-good way. Like, there's a good, narratively satisfying way to be sad, and there's a bad way to be sad. That was sad in the bad way. It was just pain, and there was really not extra things to it. I mean, I'm criticizing. I'm criticizing, an Orwell book for having a sad ending, but I get to do that. because it's not my fault. It's not my fault if a problem is inherent, or it's not my problem if a problem is inherent to the book you set out to write. If something decreases my enjoyment of a book, it's a problem. Though, of course, it couldn't have ended any other way. I still have to acknowledge that. Holy crap, I never... Let me just... I never turned on my lizard's UV lamp this morning. I apologize for that. You know what? Okay, so basically, yeah, it's not my problem if there's a problem with the project you set out to attempt. It couldn't have ended any other way because it ends basically where the Russian Revolution was when Orwell was writing. Though it would be fun. Someone who writes fan fiction, write a sequel to Animal Farm, which is an allegory for the collapse of the Soviet Union. And try to recapture that lighthearted tone it had earlier on, because that was what made it amazing. That part was amazing. And later on, it's still good, but as it gets more serious and gets more somber, it's not sad like in a evocative way. It's just kind of depressing. But of course, it wasn't meant to, it wasn't meant primarily to be a great story. It was meant to be a great satire, and it's definitely that. But I mean, that just leads into, and I thought I was wrapping up there, but apparently I have more to say. That just leads into, the issue of how relevant is it today? Because, the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Russia is monumentally less shitty right now as it was then, even though it's still shitty in certain respects. And I would say it's definitively more shitty than the United States or the UK or anything we would consider, because today, even though the original First World, Second World, Third World categorization was based on Cold War, I think in the modern sense, I would say Russia is part of the First World. And I would say Russia is probably, at least from a standpoint of its governance, it's probably the shittiest. It's the shittiest first world power that I can think of. The U.S. is definitely better, at least in its domestic policy. And I would say in its foreign policy, too. Given Crimea, I think Crimea was shittier than just about anything the U.S. has done recently. And it's, they spy on their own citizens way more, apparently, from what I've heard. Which, not that we don't do it a lot, but they do it more. Okay, but patriotism aside. Russia today sucks, by the way. Okay, now patriotism is aside. I would love to see someone... Actually, what I would love to see someone do is start the book at the rise of Gorbachev and end it after the rise of Putin, because that would be fun. But make sure no one dies. That's my rule for you. No one gets to die, because Animal Farm gets worse. It's got this lighthearted, absurdist tone to it that kind of breaks when bad things start happening. And so I'm not I'm always defensive about this. I'm always worried that when I say I don't like the unhappy ending, that I'm always worried that people will think I'm just being a baby. Because that's what my older brother used to say, and it's kind of scarred me. I'm not just being a baby. I like the unhappy ending in 1984. It worked there. I like it more than the discussion I mentioned that I was having with some friends. Some of them brought up that they found the ending unsatisfactory, at least to some degree. I disagreed with them. I found it completely emotionally satisfactory. So I can take unhappy endings. I just didn't care for this one. I just found it a little too depressing. And I think that if Orwell had played it just a little bit differently, if he had perhaps, I don't know, if he had done whatever he did in 1984, but maybe he would have needed more time to do that. Because I think that the problem is that in Animal Farm does in like the last few pages what 1984 did in the last several chapters, which is I guess why it just didn't work as well when Animal Farm did it, as far as I'm concerned. Well, that's all I have to say. One more thing I need to do. I need to advertise the next book. And I'm already 70 pages into this one. The Strain. And I can see it. Hold on, let me check. Yeah, you can't read it. Let me hold it up there. Yeah, now you can. This is The Strain by, I don't have glasses or contacts in, so Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. And I'm already part of the way. I'm already at the first interlude, so I've read basically they've gone on the plane and they found the survivor. Spoiler. And so I'll talk about this one next time, hopefully as close to Halloween as possible. And given how fast I'm going through it, if I really am reading 70 pages a day of this, it's another long one, which is why I was hesitant to take it up right after the book that was right after Game of Thrones. But I just, something about the idea of it intrigued me, because I'm going through a bit of a vampire phase right now. I'm planning to go as a vampire for Halloween. And so I thought I'd read it. And I love the idea of a vampire apocalypse. And I really hope we get prominent viewpoint character type coverage from vampires, so we can see their side of the story, because they're the most interesting things. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye.